Hey everyone, it's Ben Hardy here, and in today's video we're going to be talking about Jeep's turbocharged 2-liter 4-cylinder and whether or not it is actually a good engine to go for and if it is reliable. First and foremost, a huge shout out and thank you to the Larry Miller Jeep Chrysler here in Provo, Utah for giving me some time with this pre-owned Jeep that they have right now. It is available for sale if you're interested. Check out the inventory in the description down below. And then as always, if you want to save time and money the next time you purchase a car, link to my car buying guide in the description down below as well. Let's just get right into the review. Let's first go over the specs of the turbocharged 2-liter 4-cylinder. So first off, it's a turbocharged 2-liter 4-cylinder. Goes through an 8-speed automatic transmission. It is good for 270 horsepower at 5,200 RPMs and then 295 pound-feet of torque at 3,000 RPMs, which gives the Wrangler 0 to 60 time of about 6 seconds, which is just absolutely astonishing. And so yeah, on the surface, right, it sounds like a pretty solid powertrain, and it allows the Jeep Wrangler to get really solid fuel economy numbers. You should be able to average somewhere in the low 20s with this powertrain, which again is just really solid. In other vehicles, it seems like it helps them average again somewhere in the low 20s. Jeep typically reserves this powertrain for larger SUVs, like for example in the new Grand Cherokee 4xe, they have this powertrain paired to a hybrid system in that vehicle. But I've been recommending this engine for quite some time, and a lot of people have been like, what are you talking about? Why would you recommend this engine? It's a turbocharged 2-liter in a, well, glorified Fiat, right? Because that's what everyone calls Jeeps nowadays, since they got bought up by Fiat, but now Fiat got bought up by Stellantis and so on and so forth. There's a lot happening in the automotive industry. Here's the deal. The reason I've been recommending this engine is it is actually very reliable. So this particular Wrangler, if we go from under the hood to inside, has about... the seat made a farting noise, that's funny. 36,000 miles on the odometer. Now, I've seen several of these Wranglers, we're gonna turn that back off so the air conditioning doesn't go crazy, with, 50,000 plus miles with this powertrain. I've even seen Wranglers with over 100,000 miles with this powertrain, and they are still running strong. They did a really good job on this powertrain, and that's why they're doubling down on this powertrain by using it in their new 4xe, for example, right? And we're gonna make a whole nother video on the 4xe powertrain, because that one, well, yeah, there's a lot going on with that. But anyways, from a reliability standpoint, so far, the 2.0 has been just absolutely phenomenal. And so with that being said, in the next part of the review, we're going to drive this Wrangler with the 2.0, and I'm going to talk about some more benefits of the 2.0. And by the end of this video, I'm hoping that you guys will probably be convinced that you should get a 2.0 Wrangler instead of a V6 Wrangler, and that you should get a 2.0 Cherokee instead of a V6 Cherokee, because this is by far the superior powertrain. Okay, so setting off in the Wrangler with the turbo 2-liter 4-cylinder, and I love Wrangler turning radius. It's so solid. I just drove a 3500 Cummins before this, and as cool as it feels to be in that truck, it is such a tank, whereas this just, has such great maneuverability. Now let's kind of talk about how this engine actually drives. So, compared to the naturally aspirated V6, it produces the torque at lower RPMs, and so it just feels like it has so much more get up and go compared to the V6 when you're just kind of going around town. Like, you don't have to dive into the throttle as much. And then on top of that, I'm at like 4,600 feet elevation here, okay? And so turbocharged engines are king up here. Naturally aspirated engines, unless they have really big power, just don't feel all that great. Pretty much anything that's below, like, I'd say 250 horsepower just doesn't feel that great when you're at this high of elevation. And things don't really start to feel quick until you're in that like 400 plus horsepower range if it's a naturally aspirated engine, again, at this elevation. And I think that's important with, Jeeps, because these are adventure vehicles, especially Wranglers, right? But all Jeeps are ultimately adventure vehicles nowadays. And so I think it's important that you would have an engine that would perform at higher elevation, because if you're going to go on adventures and climb mountains and all that kind of stuff, you want to still be able to have power while doing that. Now, I understand that there's a lot of regions in the US that, obviously you're at sea level, or if you live in like Louisiana, then you're below sea level in certain places, right? So I get that, but at the same time, like, this feels fast for a Wrangler, and that's something that you weren't able to say just like a few years ago, before the JL series came out. When we had the JK series, like, unless someone did a crazy V8 swap, everyone was talking about like, oh, Wranglers are so cool, they're great off-road, but they are so slow, they're gutless. Obviously, Jeep added the 8-speed automatic transmission, which helped the V6 quite a bit. But then they put this engine in, and this really, really amped things up quite a bit, because it just pushes so hard. I mean, look here. So first off, Wrangler handling, pretty solid with the Sahara. Like, boom, you get those turbos, and this thing just rockets. It does have a little bit of turbo lag, but it's not bad at all. It really isn't. And again, this just feels so much better at high elevation. And I want to talk a little bit more on the reliability. So again, I've been recommending this for quite some time, and a lot of my friends that work at Jeep dealerships will recommend people to buy this as well. You know, some of them will just be like, get whatever powertrain you want, but you know, the ones that are like Jeep guys that actually take their Jeeps off-road, they actually recommend this as well, because this powertrain performs really well off-road. Now, I've actually never taken a just this engine off-road. I've only taken a 4xe off-road, which has this engine, and it also has the hybrid component, obviously, with the Wrangler and with the Grand Cherokee. But what I can tell you, from what I've learned by taking both 4xe's off-road, is this powertrain's great in most circumstances. There are some circumstances that there is a slight downside, and that is really, really aggressive, like steep rock crawling. Sometimes you get just a little bit too much power from this engine, whereas the naturally aspirated engine would be a little bit more like linear, whereas this, like I've been on certain obstacles with especially the Grand Cherokee, because that thing just kept spinning out, because it's, you know, it doesn't have solid axles like the Wrangler, and basically it's like nothing, and then all of a sudden you hit the turbos and then like whoop over the obstacle, like it would just jump over it. So that is a slight downside with off-roading, but for the most part, when you're in low range and when you're just crawling and everything, it just goes up everything. And you can even idle up some obstacles, which is crazy because this just has so much torque. That's how cool it is. And so, you know, I think from like an on-road application perspective, especially compared to the V6s, right? Especially compared to the V6s, this gets just as good fuel economy, if not better, in most circumstances. Especially, I mean, it depends on how you drive it, but especially if you drive it reasonably, you're gonna get better fuel economy if you're not getting the turbos all the time. If you're not gonna be doing this. It's so fun though, and it's like just snappy. But yeah, better fuel economy, power's way better, acceleration's way better. Like, this actually feels quick. Like, I feel like you can actually have fun with the Wrangler, and you can have fun with the Jeep Cherokee that also has this powertrain, for example, on road. Whereas like the V6, you know, it has the Wrangler driving dynamics, which are fun, but it's not fun from an acceleration perspective. This is actually exciting from an acceleration perspective. And then, you know, from an off-road application perspective, from an adventure perspective with this powertrain, right? You're gonna do better at higher elevation because it's turbocharged. So if you're gonna be climbing mountains and everything, you're not gonna have crazy power loss. And I can tell you that it can get pretty bad. I've taken several naturally aspirated vehicles, for example, the new Toyota Tacoma TRD Pro and the new 4Runner TRD Pro, which both have naturally aspirated V6s at high elevation, and it gets bad. Like, I had a situation with the Tacoma where I was literally cresting a mountain, and I just, like, the engine started to drop in RPMs because it just did not have the power at that elevation to just keep going, and I barely made it over. It was a 30-degree incline, so it was pretty aggressive. Like, it was some pretty serious stuff, but at the same time, like, that's part of the adventure aspect, right? And so you don't have to worry about that with a turbocharged engine like this. The only downside I see to this engine, frankly, is not on-road, it's just off-road. With certain obstacles, I didn't notice it as much with the Wrangler, I noticed it more with the Grand Cherokee 4xe, is sometimes you hit the turbos and they just will wall up over an obstacle. But when I took that Rubicon 4xe off-road, that was super smooth. Like, that was really smooth. But again, the Wrangler, obviously having solid front and rear axles, gets just so much more traction off-road. It articulates way better than a, you know, Jeep Grand Cherokee, and so it's not gonna have that same slipping typically, so you're not gonna have that, you know, just wall-upping over rocks situation. So yeah, overall, the point that I make this video, the reason I made this video is, I think this is the powertrain to go for. If you're gonna get a new Jeep Wrangler, go for this powertrain. You know, obviously the new 4xe is exciting. I'm going to talk about that in another video, but I don't necessarily think that's the one to go for yet. If you just want a few quick reasons, first off, there are some reliability concerns. Secondly, it's expensive. Thirdly, It does not come with the Extreme Recon package in the Wrangler, so you can't get the cool big beefy tires. You can get that with the 2.0, by the way. I reviewed one earlier this month. One of the guys at the Jeep dealership bought one. So I reviewed one of those earlier this month, and so I think the 2.0 is the route to go with the Wrangler, with the Cherokee. You know, obviously there's vehicles where you can't get the 2.0, you can only get the 4xe, like the Grand Cherokee, for example, is in that boat. And so I'll talk about that in a future video. Loud Subaru. I'll talk about that in a future video. But if you're gonna buy a Jeep and you have an option between a naturally aspirated V6 and a turbocharged 2-liter 4-cylinder, I know it might sound counterintuitive. Get the turbo 4-cylinder. It's gonna be just as reliable, if not more reliable, than the V6. Power delivery is gonna be better, fuel economy is gonna be better. You're just gonna love your experience so much more. And you can argue with me in the comment section below. That's why YouTube has comments. Let me know if you disagree with me. But I've seen so many of these with high mileage now, and I've read a lot of reviews on this too, on top of that, from owners, and it seems like everyone loves this powertrain. And so I don't get the point of getting a V6 at this point with this engine existing. That's all. That's gonna sum things up for our video going over this engine. Again, a huge shout out, thank you to the Large Miller Jeep Chrysler here in Provo, Utah, for giving me some time with this Jeep so I could do this video. Check out the info in the description down below. I'll see you guys.